It's very easy to mislead the audience without telling a lie. It's very easy, even if you're just trying to establish the basic facts of what happened, to lead the audience to make plausible but untrue assumptions about why. We went through a period on this YouTube channel where Melissa and I both seem to be suggesting that the central problem with her behavior over the last 5 years was a kind of addiction to pornography, an addiction to the internet itself, and in part an addiction to masturbation, or a kind of fetish for posting pictures of her own nude body and hearing back the approval of other men. That is totally untrue. That is a kind of plausible explanation for what happened, but that is not why. And, if you're trying to make YouTube videos that are only 5 minutes long, 20 minutes long, even 40 minutes long, and you're just setting out, you're just trying to establish what happened, that can mislead the audience into a false sense of certainty that they know why. It's true, Melissa took photographs of her own vagina and sent it to these various men. It's true that she did this kind of thing, but that is not why it happened. That's not the problem. And if you think that's the problem, it's going to lead you to a whole bunch of false conclusions as to what now would be the solution. Melissa is a person who is capable of being brilliant for about 2 hours a day. She is not a person of ordinary intelligence. She is a person of extraordinary intelligence. I have seen a lot of the raw materials of real genius from her, and I have from day one of the relationship. I know talent when I see it. I can recognize what's right with her. I can recognize what's wrong with her. However, while she is a person of above average intelligence, she is a person of below average self-discipline. I would even say below average self-awareness. And that is why she is lucky to get 2 hours of productive work out of a day. Okay? I've seen her work on paper in her own handwriting that shows real brilliance. And we had a lot of days during these years of her cheating on me where she read a chapter of my book, whatever book it was I was writing at the time I was working on. She read it. She offered corrections, she offered suggestions, and she maybe spent 2 hours having really brilliant conversation with me about what was in the book and what could change and different ideas and kind of philosophical and political concepts that came up for her when she was reading the book. Okay? So on a bad day, 1 hour of brilliance. On a good day, 2 hours of brilliance. And of course, many days she just squanders this. And then, you've got another 22 hours of the day, some of which she's asleep for, but during a whole lot of which she is dumbing out. The central problem that led to all of this misbehavior on her part, sexual and otherwise, is Melissa's stupidity and her enjoying the company of other people who are stupider than herself, lazier than herself, holding themselves to lower intellectual standards than herself so that she can feel superior to them. So again, if you just look at the kind of bare facts of her correspondence with these men, if you just look at the surface, you might see this dialogue between her and Abhishek, this dialogue between her and Oliver, the younger man, and you might think like, oh wow, Melissa is really impressed with this guy. Like she's either impressed with how attractive he is or how intelligent he is, whatever. No. In the actual voice recordings and in the actual written dialogue, the typewritten messages, Abhishek sounds mentally retarded. And Melissa was a person who, for these years of her life, enjoyed spending about 2 hours a day being brilliant with me, which I appreciated. It was the light of my life, was having those kind of 2 hours of brilliant conversation, collaboration, whatever it was that we had. And then she enjoyed sitting down and listening to this retard talk about what he ate for lunch and what he's going to do meeting up with his friends on the weekend and the tennis game he watched on cable TV, and even listening to him talk about, like, I don't know, stock market investment or cryptocurrency, and her pandering to him, her kind of sympathy, her playing along, her pretending to be dumb. Now, on his side, I'm sure he just perceives her as equally as dumb as himself. I'm just going to throw out a couple more examples here. Melissa would sit down and have these long dialogues with this guy, Leo, who is retarded, who is a moron, who could not finish high school, a moron who got a GED and went into the military. This is a stupid guy. Listen to him talk about his tattoos and his interest in Japanese cartoons and porn. All these guys she talked to about porn. She hates porn. She despises porn. During that period of her life, she did. I mean, she's probably changed a little bit now. But during that period of her life, she hates porn. She hates anime. She hates Japanese cartoons. She hates watching tennis or any other sports. She hates and despises all this stuff. But she's leading this guy on like, oh, wow, tell me about your tattoos. Tell me about anime. It's not BDSM. They can't perceive the way in which this is denigrating to them, like the way in which, like, really, this is denigrating to the man. This is her feeling intellectually superior to someone who is frankly intellectually disabled. Okay? And even with Oliver, whom she started pursuing when he was only 18 years old, all right? In many ways, Oliver, especially when he's speaking to Melissa, I've got to come back to this. All these guys behave differently when they're talking to Melissa as opposed to when they're kind of stepping it up. They're making an effort to be as intelligent as they can be. Okay? When Melissa is talking to Oliver, he's a very immature guy who frankly has signs of mental disability himself. That's always how I perceived him. That's why I didn't want to be friends with them. And Melissa really forced me into a close friendship with a guy I did not want to have. I perceived this as a troubled youth who needed help and needed advice and needed guidance. He sure as shit did not need to be seduced by Melissa Damitz, not at 18 and not at 21. But this guy is unsophisticated, to say the least, and in many ways seems autistic. Again, I've seen the written messages. I've heard the voice messages. I've heard the retarded recordings of this kid singing songs. And so Melissa's sitting there listening to him singing in his fucking retarded voice and listening to him talking about his struggles at school and shit. Okay, the men at the other end, they don't understand what the ego trip for Melissa is. It's not BDSM. It's not sexual. Whew, a lot to say. It's very easy to look at the bare fact that Melissa masturbated in connection to all these online affairs and more and say, oh, okay, for her, this was a turn on, this was a kink, this was sexually gratified. Well, okay, I have heard Melissa say at every stage, like not just in the last 6 months when she's admitting what really happened. I remember her saying way back when these affairs were going on, how she didn't find this guy attractive. It didn't turn her on. The different guys actually scared her, creeped her out, turned her off. And again, I've seen a lot of the evidence of it. There is really a sense in which she was tolerating begrudgingly the sexual component of these conversations so that she could indulge this stupid side of her character, so that she could be dumbing out, so she could sit there and monologue about her relationship with her uncle who was dying of a heart attack and her attempts to convince her uncle that he should not just quit smoking, but also quit drinking alcohol and adopt a vegan diet. Okay? Now, that is a conversation, this conversation about her worthless uncle. That's a conversation she had with me. But when she had that conversation with me, she had to have it way up here. She had to have it at a very high level of intelligence, intensity, right? We had a really meaningful conversation. If you guys have seen my YouTube channel, you know how I roll. I get out of bed talking about politics and history and philosophy at a high level. I fall asleep after midnight talking about and dreaming about politics, history, and philosophy at a very high level. It's very intense to me all the time, and there's pressure on her, even if she's just talking about what's going on in her family, to have that conversation at a really high level. When she talks to these other guys, these guys she is simping for and who simp for her, she gets to have the same conversation at a level of stupidity that I find embarrassing to everyone else involved. The same way she'll sit there with these guys like, oh, wow, you watched the tennis game? That sounds great. Oh, wow, what did you have for lunch? Oh, that's a great tattoo. And she intensely hates tattoos. She despises and looks down on any man who would have a tattoo anywhere on his body. Like, I mean, again, this is just her. She's a unique human being. I know her. I understand what's going on when I'm looking at these dialogues. She's receiving, again, voice messages from these guys and videos from these guys in which they look pathetic, in which they sound retarded. And I'm sorry, this includes Oliver, the so-called intellectual of the bunch. It's fucking shameful. And for her, that's not a bug. That's not a defect, right? That is the game. That is what she likes about this exchange, about this system. So again, it's easy to look at a kind of isolated factor. Like, okay, yeah, her relationship with Abhishek included masturbation, included the exchange of nude photographs. Yes, and that adds up to a few minutes here and there. Guess what adds up to hours per day? Hours and hours per day, day after day for years. This is true of Abhishek. This is true of Oliver. And it was only true of Leo to a lesser extent, because I think Leo was never that interested in her. She would have developed the same kind of thing. Guess what's up to? Many hours, not minutes. Precisely this kind of dumbing out. So again, Melissa said to me at every stage about Abhishek, she was grossed out by this guy. So again, this is back when it was happening. This is kind of before, after, during, in retrospect. She was scared of this guy. She thought he was retarded. She thought there was something wrong with him, like intellectually, emotionally. Again, I've seen the messages. If this sounds implausible to you, let me tell you something. I've seen the messages, I've seen the videos, I've heard the audio recordings. Oh, it's plausible. Okay? This was someone she looked down upon with scorn. There was a stage at which she told me she did not enjoy the masturbation at all. And again, you can just look at the primary source and it's misleading. There was a period in which I was furious at her and I was saying, look, you're lying to me. You're telling me you didn't enjoy masturbating with this guy. But here's this message, 100 messages, whatever, there are dozens of messages, where you're saying to him how wonderful it is that you guys are doing this masturbation. Okay, but guess which one is the truth? Now, it's upsetting for Melissa both ways. She tells me this. From her perspective, she's trying to be honest. She's saying, look, she wasn't really turned on with this guy. She didn't like this guy. She didn't enjoy the masturbation. She's told me at every stage, and again, I've seen the evidence of this, she was terrified that these guys were in a position to blackmail her. And that includes Oliver. She felt, don't want to misrepresent this. She felt that she was held captive by Abhishek. She felt that she was held captive by Leo, and she even felt that she was held captive by Oliver. That all of these guys were in a position to blackmail her because of what she had given them, what she had shown that they could use against her to expose her, to humiliate her. Right now, yes, you can say that's a bit paranoid, that's a bit stupid. Okay, my point is, when she was actually going through this, when she was actually in these relationships for so many hours a day, her actual feelings were largely of self-loathing, revulsion and loathing toward the man concerned, right? Again, you can do a kind of BDSM interpretation of this. Like, why do you keep doing it, right? And this form of self-indulgence that most of you have plenty of in your daily lives. Some of you have too much of it in your daily lives. You want to escape from it. But that she was lacking and she craved. This form of self-indulgence where she gets to play dumb with someone dumber than herself. And again, this includes Oliver. Oliver, this totally unsophisticated, somewhat mentally disabled fucking teenager, he's 18, 19, later 20 and 21 in this equation, where she gets to be the one who's smart and sits back in judgment on the other person. Whether that is her just pretending that she approves of the tattoos, the anime, the cosplay, the watching sports on TV, just this dumb shit. Or it's her kind of wading into the stupidity, her talking in a totally self-indulgent way about her relationship with her uncle, whatever, her conflicts with her mother, her father, her brothers. She put hours and hours into dumbing out about, complaining about the pettiest shit in her life, okay? And it is not the case that she couldn't talk to me about that stuff. But when she talked to me about any problem in life, because I put so many hours into talking about all her concerns, whether they were petty or profound, she had to make a level of effort up here. She had to be a real intellectual. She had to perform that level. And the irony is, I had relationships with a lot of these people too. I spoke to Oliver directly. I spoke to Abhishek directly, right? I spoke to Leo directly. The other guy, Matt Colombo, I communicated with him directly. All of these people, and there were women too. Ava in Japan, okay? Ava in Japan's a great example. Ava and Matt. When Ava talks to me, if she has a Skype call with me, email with me, she knows it has to be way up here. That intellectually, she has to make a big effort. She has to bring this level of intensity, okay? And when she talks to Melissa, she's dumbing out. She is just holding herself to a lower standard. Matt Colombo doesn't want to waste my time. He has too much respect for me. When he talks to me, it's way up here. When he talks to Melissa, he is dumbing out. And Oliver, who put so many hours into this bullshit fake relationship with Melissa that really did ruin her life. It had terrible, terrible impacts for Melissa. In some ways, of course, I pity Oliver. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine how much this has fucked up Oliver's life. He's not telling me, but I suspect he is way more damaged by this than he wants to admit to himself at this stage. Okay, it's very, very harmful and hurtful what Melissa did to Oliver, privately more than publicly, okay? But Melissa's like ridiculous hundreds and hundreds of hours poured into this bullshit dialogue with Oliver. Oliver has said to me directly what I have seen in the primary source, in his messages, his audio recordings, and his text with Melissa. Like, I know this is true. He has said to me, Zell, the main reason he would talk to Melissa is because he knew, like, he didn't want to waste my time. I'm busy, I'm demanding. People call me up or send me emails. I go, what? Okay, what are we talking about? And I am going to be very businesslike and forthright. Like, okay, you got a problem with university? Okay, let's talk about it. Here's the problem, here's the solution, here's my advice. It's going to be very analytical, it's going to be very high intellectual level. If he talks to Melissa, he can be dumbing out. He holds himself to a lower standard. Now, I said before, some of you may have lots of relationships with this. You may have relationships with your brother, sister, cousins, friends you've known since primary school, friends you've known since high school. You may have a workplace where you're surrounded by stupid people who have stupid conversations with you, whether that's about your personal life, your relationship with your uncle who's having a heart attack, whether it's about politics. You may be a person of mediocre intelligence who feels brilliant all the time because you're in the company of people far stupider than yourself. Okay, that was not Melissa's situation during these years. Melissa was not in school. She did not have a job. Coronavirus lockdown. She was stuck in an apartment with me, someone who demanded a really high level of intellectual intensity, a really high level of effort in every conversation. And she did that. And she loved it. She loved me for it. She appreciated what I brought to the relationship, intellectually, emotionally, ethically, talking about history and politics. She loved that for about 2 hours a day because that's what she could handle. She could read and write and have brilliant intellectual conversation with me for about 2 hours a day. But that leaves 22 hours. And what she craved was the kind of stupid, self-indulgent conversation she had become accustomed to, I think, as a child, maybe with some of her female friends in high school. And I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it in her writing, seen it in the written messages that have been revealed to me, but I've also seen it when she was just sitting there on Skype, just sitting there and talking about nothing, just wasting time for 3 hours at a stretch. I saw her do that with women. I saw that do with women she had a bisexual crush on. She had like a lesbian crush on. I've seen her do it with men she had a crush on to whatever extent, right? But I have just seen the way she spent years dumbing out, okay? So here's the point. You can look at these facts in isolation and you can say, okay, it's all about sex, it's all about porn, it's all about internet addiction. There's a lot of cruelty in her story. There's a lot of cruelty of her directed against me, a lot of malice. You can look at it that way. Like, oh, she was doing all this intentionally to hurt Eisel. You can look at it in terms of jealousy, in terms of inferiority. An old analysis, which has been totally debunked. You can look at it as her rebelling against being in a polyamorous relationship, as if what she really wanted to be was monogamous, or she wanted to punish me because all these beautiful, intelligent women want to sleep with me and nobody wants to sleep with her. There are all kinds of different analytic optics you can bring to it, and none of them are true. All of them are misleading. They're all assigning motivations to particular facts that do not match. If what she wanted to do was masturbate and create porn of herself on the internet, she would have done that, period. If what she wanted was a handsome man to masturbate and send pictures, she would have found that. That's not hard to find, okay? And if what she wanted was a real intellectual relationship with a real intellectual, she would have found that too. She had that with me. She could have had that with other men and other women. That is not what she wanted. What she wanted from Abhishek was exactly what she got. 12 hours a day of dumbing out. 12 hours a day in which she got to feel like she was smarter than and morally superior to the person she was talking to, because she was. She wanted to talk to Leo, not because he was hot. He's not. He's disgusting. And she felt disgusted by him, and she felt afraid of him. And she told me all that. That was all true. She was not turned on by Leo. Leo was a moron. He was someone who is ethically bad, intellectually bad, repugnant, but she got to feel superior to him in those conversations. And I know it seems paradoxical, but this is the most important point required to understand what happened with Oliver. If she had wanted to have a normal sexual relationship with Oliver, there would have been nothing shameful about it. There would have been nothing to conceal. That's not what she wanted, and that's not what the relationship was. She was ashamed for a reason. She was concealing this for a reason. She was living a lie for a reason within an open relationship, within a polyamorous situation. What she was doing with Oliver was disgusting. Even though Oliver is not a disgusting person in the same way that Abhishek is, in the same way that Leo is, in the same way that, frankly, Matt Colombo is. No offense, okay? Why did Melissa feel ashamed? Because this was a mentally disabled teenager that she was poning. That's the fucking truth. It's way worse than BDSM. There is no reason. If she wanted to have an open sexual relationship with that kid, she could have been honest with him. She could have been honest with me. That's not what she wanted. What she wanted was exactly what she got. The kid, his motivations are completely different. His motivations, he said this to me directly. I've seen him saying it to Melissa too. He did not want to waste my time. He wanted to be able to tell Melissa things. He would write to her all the time and say, oh, hey, tell Zell this. Hey, tell Zell this. He didn't want to seduce Melissa. He didn't even really want to have a friendship with Melissa. He followed my channel since he was 14 years old. He had a kind of intellectual connection to me. And again, I'm someone who tried to give him grandfatherly advice, including about what he was doing in university. I tried to be a very unequal friend to him because I'm so much older and so much wiser. I did not want to be friends with him in any other sense. The only role I can play in his life is being a kind of grandfather. And I deeply resent to this day the way in which Melissa dragged me into a relationship with that kid. I did not want to have, okay? But on his side, he doesn't think he's seducing this older woman, and he doesn't think he is being seduced by her. He does not perceive the sexual component, no matter how blatant Melissa is about it, again and again and again. But you can't understand what's happening here by looking at the sexual component in isolation. If that's what it was about, then her relationship with him would have been 15 minutes a day. Same with Abhishek. It could have been 15 minutes a day, and it wasn't. It's 12 hours a day. That's not the bug, that's the system. The hours and hours of totally stupid, self-indulgent conversation, which from Melissa is self-congratulatory, which from Melissa is an ego trip. This is where she gets to feel like she's the smart one, right? That she's smarter than the man she is denigrating. She is denigrating these men by simping for them, by pretending to be dumb enough to be impressed by what they are saying about anime, cosplay, tattoos, tennis on TV. Okay? That is the central problem. That is the fundamental evil that led what could have been a minor sexual dalliance in Melissa's life to instead be something fate-altering and life-destroying. Melissa is fundamentally a brilliant and talented person for 2 hours a day. She allowed what she does with the other 22 hours during the coronavirus period to change her life for the worse forever.